padlock. It was such a small, insignificant thing, really. Yet, when the Homeowners Association demanded a key to my private lakefront gate, ostensibly for community access, I had no earthly idea it would unearth years of corruption, embezzlement, and outright criminal activity that would rock our entire neighborhood to its core. Would you believe the path to justice began with that simple, stubborn padlock? I still vividly remember the precise moment my tranquil life at Cedar Lake dissolved into a nightmare. It was a Tuesday, bathed in the warm glow of a bright afternoon sun. I was working from home, deeply engrossed in a project, when the doorbell chimed, shattering my concentration. I wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, I spotted Jessica, the Maple Springs HOA president, standing on my porch, arms tightly crossed, her expression like thunder. Her signature pearl necklace, usually a symbol of refined elegance, seemed to gleam menacingly in the sunlight as she tapped her foot with undisguised impatience. I took a deep, calming breath and opened the door. "Hello, Jessica," I began, trying to inject a note of friendliness into my voice despite our historically rocky relationship. "What brings you here today?" She dispensed with pleasantries entirely. "The board held an emergency meeting last night concerning your new gate," she announced, her voice sharp enough to slice through steel. "You've effectively blocked the lake access path that everyone has been using for decades." I blinked, genuinely bewildered. "That path is on my property," I stated, keeping my voice level. "I double-checked the deed when I purchased this house last year." "Well, that's precisely why I'm here." Jessica's smile didn't even pretend to reach her eyes. It was the smile of a predator. "The board voted unanimously. You must provide us with a key to your gate, effective immediately. Homeowners are complaining. They're forced to walk an extra 10 minutes around to get to the lake." My stomach clenched. I had installed that gate after finding beer cans and assorted trash strewn across my property 3 weekends in a row. People were treating my yard, my home, like a public park. "Jessica, I'm truly sorry, but I consulted with the county. The property maps clearly delineate that path as private. It belongs to me. It's not a community shortcut." Her face flushed, a dangerous shade of crimson. "That path has been used by residents since before you were even born," she hissed. "There's such a thing as established use, you know." "Actually," I countered, my voice surprisingly steady, "I spoke with my attorney before installing the gate. There's no easement recorded on my deed, and I've been consistently posting no trespassing signs for the past 6 months, effectively preventing any claim of established use." Jessica's eyes narrowed into slits, dangerous and cold. "The HOA bylaws clearly state that all homeowners must maintain community aesthetics and access. Your gate is in flagrant violation of Section 7. "Section 7 pertains to community property," I replied, immensely grateful that I'd painstakingly read that entire, mind-numbingly boring document when I moved in. "My land is not community property." Jessica took a step closer, lowering her voice to a chilling whisper. "Listen to me, and listen carefully. The board has ways of making things exceedingly uncomfortable for difficult homeowners. Last year, David fought us on his fence height. He ended up with $122,000 in fines and a lien against his house. Just hand over the key, and this all magically goes away." A chill, cold and clammy, snaked its way down my spine. Was she threatening me? Was this really happening? "I believe we're finished here, Jessica," I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my efforts. "If the HOA wishes to pursue this further, you are welcome to contact my attorney." I handed her my lawyer's business card, then gently but firmly closed the door as she sputtered in outraged disbelief through the window. I watched her storm down my front path, her phone already pressed to her ear, her face a mask of fury. I immediately dialed my lawyer, Mark, and explained the unfolding situation. Document everything, he advised, his voice calm and reassuring. If they continue to escalate, we'll need irrefutable evidence. That night, sleep was a distant, unattainable luxury. Around 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed insistently with a security alert. I grabbed it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The app displayed 3 shadowy figures at my back gate. I instantly recognized Jessica's distinctive blonde, Bob, along with Robert, the HOA treasurer, and Michael, the facilities manager. Robert was holding something that glinted menacingly in the security light. Was that bolt cutters? My blood ran cold. I frantically hit record on the app and dialed 911. "There are people attempting to break into my property," I told the dispatcher, my voice shaking uncontrollably. By the time I'd thrown on some clothes and hurried downstairs, my doorbell was ringing again. A police officer, Officer Williams, stood there, flashlight in hand. "I'm Officer Williams," he stated. "We received a call about trespassers." I showed him the security footage, still recording. "That's the HOA board members attempting to break my lock," I explained, my voice still trembling. Officer Williams frowned, his expression hardening. "Let's go take a look." We walked around to my back gate. The intruders were gone, but my padlock bore deep, angry scratch marks. The officer shined his light around, revealing clear footprints in the soft soil. "I'll need to file a report," he said, his voice grim. "This constitutes attempted breaking and entering." As he meticulously wrote up the report, headlights swept across my driveway. A silver SUV pulled up, and Jessica, accompanied by Robert, stepped out. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," Jessica exclaimed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We were merely checking on community property that this homeowner has illegally blocked off." Officer Williams looked between us, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, according to county records, this is private property. You were recorded attempting to damage a lock on private property after hours." Jessica's face hardened. "This is an HOA matter, not a police matter," she insisted. "We have bylaws." "Bylaws do not supersede state law, ma'am," Officer Williams interrupted, his voice firm. "I strongly suggest you consult with your HOA attorney before taking any further action that could be construed as criminal trespassing or vandalism." After they left, Officer Williams turned to me. "Keep that camera running," he advised. "If they return, call us immediately." I barely slept a wink that night, the events replaying in my mind like a terrifying movie. The next morning, my inbox was overflowing with 5 separate HOA violation notices: hedge height, mailbox color, unapproved garden border, excessive water usage, and improper security modifications. Each violation carried a hefty $100 daily fine. The battle lines had been drawn, stark and unforgiving. I had absolutely no idea how ugly things were about to get, or that my seemingly insignificant gate would unlock secrets that would shake our entire community to its very foundations. At 6:30 a.m., my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts flooded in from neighbors I barely knew. "Did you see what they posted about you? Are you really blocking lake access? The emergency meeting tonight is all about your property." I rubbed my tired eyes and opened the Maple Springs Community app. There it was, in bold, glaring letters, a special announcement from Jessica. "Urgent. Homeowner blocks historic lake access. Emergency meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. at the clubhouse. All homeowners must attend." Below was a photograph of my gate with a caption claiming I was destroying community value and privatizing access that generations of residents have enjoyed. My hands shook with a mixture of fury and disbelief. The post already had 47 comments, mostly from people I'd never even met, calling me selfish and demanding the HOA take decisive action. I called Mark, my lawyer, while brewing a pot of desperately needed coffee. "They're turning the entire neighborhood against me," I explained, my voice tight with frustration, "and these violation notices are clearly retaliatory." "Take photographs of your property," Mark advised, his voice calm and measured. "Document that nothing violates actual code. I'll draft a cease and desist letter today. Meanwhile, obtain a copy of your property survey from county records." I took the day off work and drove to the county clerk's office. The woman behind the counter looked up when I explained my request. "Maple Springs HOA issue?" she asked knowingly. I nodded, surprised. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "You're not the first," she whispered. "The HOA has been attempting to claim private lakefront properties as community access for years. They even tried to alter the county zoning maps back in 2018. My jaw dropped. "They what?" "It was rejected," she said, printing my property records, "but they keep trying. Here's your deed, survey, and property tax history. See this line? It clearly shows your property extends to the lakeshore, with no easements or right-of-way markings." Armed with official documentation, I felt a surge of confidence. I spent the afternoon taking dated photographs of my perfectly compliant property features, then filming a walkthrough of the path to definitively prove it was within my property lines. At 4:30 p.m., I returned from picking up groceries to find my gate lock utterly destroyed. A shiny, new padlock had replaced mine, with a note taped to it. "Community access restored. Contact HOA office for your key." I stood there frozen in shock, grocery bags dangling limply from my hands. They had actually destroyed my property in broad daylight. I called the police immediately. Officer Reynolds arrived this time, a different officer from the previous night. He meticulously photographed the damaged lock, the replacement, and the note. "This is vandalism and criminal trespassing," he confirmed. "Would you like to press charges?" "Yes," I replied, without a moment's hesitation. "And I want a restraining order against the board members." As Officer Reynolds wrote his report, my elderly neighbor, Sarah, shuffled down the path from her adjacent property. Her face looked worried beneath her gardening hat. "I saw them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Jessica, Robert, and that handyman they hired. They used bolt cutters. Around noon. I have it all on my bird-watching camera." I could have hugged her. "Sarah, would you be willing to tell the officer what you saw?" She nodded firmly. "I'm tired of their bullying," she declared. "They threatened to fine me last month because my bird bath was an unapproved water feature. I've had that bird bath for 23 years. Sarah's testimony and video evidence strengthened my case considerably. Officer Reynolds promised to follow up with the HOA board members. "We need to question them today," he stated. "Destruction of private property is a serious offense." As the police car pulled away, my phone rang with an unknown number. "This is Robert," said the tense voice of the HOA treasurer. "You've made a serious mistake involving the police. We're prepared to forgive the gate issue if you drop the charges immediately." "You destroyed my property," I replied, my voice shaking with anger. "That's a crime, not an HOA violation." "Listen carefully." Robert's voice dropped lower, laced with menace. "Jessica knows people at your workplace. Your manager plays golf with her husband every Sunday. Think about what matters more, a stupid gate or your career?" The threat hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. I ended the call without responding, my hands shaking again, but this time with a burning rage rather than fear. I drove to the hardware store, bought the strongest lock they had, and replaced the HOA's padlock with my own. Then I installed new security cameras at different angles and hung a laminated sign. Private property. All trespassers will be prosecuted. Area under 24-hour video surveillance. At 6:45 p.m., cars began filling the clubhouse parking lot for the emergency meeting. I arrived with Mark, my attorney, carrying folders overflowing with documentation. The room fell silent as we entered. Jessica stood at the podium, microphone in hand, her expression flickering between surprise and fury. "This is a private homeowners meeting," she announced, her voice amplified. "Outside parties are not welcome." Mark stepped forward. "I'm representing my client, who is a homeowner and has every right to attend with counsel." Whispers rippled through the room. Many residents looked confused. Furthermore, Mark continued, addressing the crowd, "This meeting violates your own bylaws, requiring 2 weeks' notice for any official HOA meeting. Any votes taken tonight would be invalid and actionable." Jessica's knuckles whitened around the microphone. "We're simply having an informational discussion about community access," she insisted. A loud knock interrupted her. Officer Reynolds entered, accompanied by 2 other police officers. "Jessica, Robert, and Michael," Officer Reynolds called out, his voice resonating through the room. "We need to speak with you regarding an incident of property destruction reported earlier today." The room erupted into chaos. Residents started shouting questions. Someone near me muttered, "They never told us that path was private property." As the police escorted the board members outside, I noticed Sarah slip me a folded piece of paper. I opened it discreetly. "Check the HOA financial reports," her shaky handwriting read. "Lake access line item, $45,000 last year. Where did the money go? No maintenance was done." I looked up at Sarah, who nodded gravely. Suddenly, I realized this fight wasn't just about my gate anymore. Something much, much bigger was hiding behind that lock. My phone rang at precisely 6:30 a.m. It was Sarah, my elderly neighbor who lived 3 houses down. "They're outside your house," she whispered, her voice laced with anxiety. "Jessica and the entire HOA board. They look furious." I peered through my blinds and saw them. 5 figures in business casual attire, huddled on my driveway, effectively blocking my car. Jessica stood at the forefront, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently, a picture of barely suppressed rage. "Thanks for the warning, Sarah," I said, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. I needed to get to work, but this confrontation was clearly unavoidable. I grabbed my phone, opened the recording app, and pressed record. Something, a deep-seated instinct, told me I'd need evidence of whatever was about to transpire. With a deep, steadying breath, I stepped outside into the cool morning air. "Good morning," I said, my voice remarkably calm, considering my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Is there a reason you're all blocking my driveway?" Jessica stepped forward, her perfectly coiffed blonde bob not moving an inch, despite the gentle breeze. "Remove that police report immediately," she demanded, her voice low and threatening. "The board has unanimously decided that your actions are hostile to community interests." "Which means," I added, prompting. "Which means," added Robert, the treasurer, whose round glasses couldn't conceal the coldness in his eyes, "that we're giving you one final chance to be reasonable before this gets unpleasant." I held my phone up, visibly, making absolutely certain they saw it was recording. "Are you threatening me? Because that's precisely what it sounds like." "We're protecting community interests," Robert retorted, adjusting his tie nervously. "That path has been used for 20 years. It's a tradition." "Not legally," I countered, my voice firm. "And not anymore. The property survey clearly indicates—" "Nobody cares about your survey," Jessica snapped, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "Do you have any idea who I am in this community?" My husband plays golf with the mayor. I chair 3 charity committees. The others nodded solemnly, as if her social standing somehow magically altered property law. That's wonderful, I replied evenly, but it doesn't grant you the right to break into my property or install locks on my gate. A red-faced man, whom I recognized as Doug from the landscaping committee, jabbed a finger towards me. You're making powerful enemies here. Think about what that means for your future in Maple Springs. I'm going to be late for work, I stated, walking towards my car. Please move aside. They reluctantly parted, but Jessica wasn't finished. She handed me an official-looking envelope. Special assessment, she declared. The board voted last night. Your property requires additional security measures due to your difficulties. $500, due by Friday. I took the envelope without opening it. My lawyer will be reviewing this, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me, as I drove away, I watched them in my rearview mirror, huddled together, whispering conspiratorially. My hands shook on the steering wheel. This was no longer just about a gate. At work, I could barely focus. During lunch, I called Mark, my lawyer, and forwarded the recording. Then I called Officer Reynolds to update him on the situation. They can't issue special assessments targeted at specific homeowners, Mark explained. That's discriminatory enforcement. Keep documenting everything. I was just finishing up a project when my phone lit up with a barrage of messages. 12 texts from neighbors, all conveying the same urgent message. Emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7 p.m. The strange part? I hadn't received any notification, despite being a homeowner. Sarah called me, her voice trembling. I just returned from my doctor's appointment, and there are signs posted all over the neighborhood about an emergency meeting. But when I called Jessica to inquire what it was about, she said it was for homeowners in good standing only. A chill ran down my spine. What were they planning? Sarah, I don't know, I whispered, my voice filled with apprehension. But Nate from down the street said they're voting on something big. He overheard Jessica on the phone saying they needed to make an example. Then came the bombshell. They're voting to put a lien on your house, Sarah exclaimed, her voice cracking with distress. Mary from the book club said Jessica told everyone you've accumulated $115,000 in violations. My legs nearly gave out. $115,000? That's utterly impossible. They're claiming you've had violations dating back 3 years that were never addressed, Sarah continued. They've got paperwork showing warning letters they claim were sent. I never received any warnings before last week, I said, my mouth dry with fear. I know, dear, it's all fabricated. Mary said she couldn't believe it either, but Jessica had fancy charts and graphs showing a history of non-compliance. I glanced at the clock, 5:30 p.m. The meeting started at 7 o'clock. I had just enough time. Sarah, thank you. Can you do me one more favor? Can you attend that meeting and text me what transpires? Of course, dear. What are you going to do? I grabbed my keys. I'm bringing in reinforcements. First, I called Officer Reynolds and explained the escalating situation. Then I called Mark, my lawyer, who agreed to meet me at the community center right away. I stopped at home just long enough to grab the folder containing all my property documents, surveys, and the security footage showing the board members breaking my lock. As I pulled into the community center parking lot at 6:55 p.m., I noticed almost every space was filled. They had rallied the entire neighborhood against me. For a moment, I sat in my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I'd never been in a fight like this before. I wasn't wealthy or powerful like Jessica. I didn't have connections or influence. All I had was the truth and the law on my side. Would that be enough? My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. They're saying terrible things about you. Jessica is showing pictures of your gate and calling it hostile architecture. Robert is talking about community property values plummeting. People are getting worked up. Come quickly. I stepped out of my car just as Mark, my lawyer, pulled up behind me. Behind him was Officer Reynolds in his patrol car, lights off, but unmistakably present. Ready? Mark asked, briefcase in hand. I took a deep breath and nodded. Let's go set the record straight. The community center fell silent when we walked in. Over 50 neighbors sat in folding chairs, all eyes turning to stare at us. Jessica stood at the front, beside a projector screen, displaying a close-up photo of my gate, with angry red circles drawn around it. Her smile vanished when she saw Mark. "This is a private meeting," she announced loudly, "for homeowners only." "Perfect," I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. "I am a homeowner, and these gentlemen are my guests." Officer Reynolds nodded politely to the crowd. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mark stepped forward. "Before you continue, I must inform everyone that this meeting violates your own HOA bylaws, which require a minimum of 2 weeks' notice for any official vote." Robert rushed to Jessica's side, whispering urgently in her ear. Her face flushed a deep crimson. "This is an emergency session," she insisted. "Special circumstances." "What emergency?" I asked, looking around the room. "A gate that's been in place for months? Or is the emergency that the police are investigating criminal property damage by board members?" Murmurs spread through the crowd. I could see confusion and dawning suspicion on many faces. My lawyer cleared his throat. "Additionally, I have documented evidence of harassment, vandalism, fraudulent violations, and discriminatory enforcement targeting my client specifically." Jessica banged a gavel I hadn't noticed before. "This is out of order. We're here to discuss community access to the lake path, which has always been private property," I finished firmly, "and I have the surveys and property records to prove it." I held up my folder. A man in the back row stood up. "Jessica, you told us this path was deeded to the community 20 years ago." Jessica's eyes darted around the room, frantically searching for an escape. "Well, there's been a traditional easement." "No easement exists in the county records," Mark interrupted. "We checked thoroughly." Officer Reynolds chose this moment to step forward. "If I might add something," he said, his calm, authoritative voice quieting the room instantly. "I'm currently investigating a case of criminal trespassing and vandalism at this property owner's gate. We have security footage and physical evidence." He held up a plastic evidence bag containing the destroyed pieces of my original lock. "We have fingerprints," he stated simply. The room erupted. Neighbors turned to each other in shock and disbelief. A woman near the front stood up, her face contorted with anger. "You said this homeowner was vandalizing community property," she shouted at Jessica. "You never said anything about this being private land." Jessica pounded her gavel desperately. "Order! We need order!" But the meeting was dissolving into chaos. My neighbor, Thomas, a quiet accountant I'd barely spoken to before, approached me. "Is it true? They broke into your property?" he asked, looking deeply troubled. I nodded and showed him the security footage on my phone. His eyes widened. "They told everyone you were trying to block lake access that had been community property for decades," he said. "They even added $50 to our quarterly dues last year for lake path maintenance." Something clicked in my mind. "Wait, they've been charging everyone for maintaining my private property?" Thomas nodded grimly. "And they raised it again this year." Mark overheard this exchange and made a note. "That could constitute fraud," he murmured to me. Across the room, Sarah was talking animatedly to a group of elderly neighbors, pointing occasionally in my direction. I could see heads nodding sympathetically. Jessica, seeing she was losing control, tried a new tactic. "This is exactly what happens when outsiders move into established communities," she shouted over the noise. They don't respect our traditions." The room quieted slightly as people turned to look at me. It was a desperate play, a blatant attempt to exploit the community's fear of change. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. "I'm not an outsider trying to change things. I'm a homeowner protecting my legal property rights. And I've discovered that your board has been charging all of you for access to and maintenance of property they don't own." Robert leaped up. "That's a lie. We have—" He stopped abruptly, looking at Jessica for help. "We have documentation," Jessica finished weakly. "Show us," called several voices at once. Officer Reynolds stepped forward again. "Actually, I'd be very interested in seeing that documentation as well. It could be relevant to our investigation." Jessica's face had turned ashen. "This meeting is adjourned," she declared, gathering her papers hastily. But it was too late. The damage was done. Neighbors were approaching me in small groups, asking questions, sharing their own stories of run-ins with the board. They fined me $200 for having my garbage can out 12 hours early when my daughter was in the hospital, one woman told me tearfully. They rejected my fence permit 3 times, then approved the exact same design when I hired Jessica's brother's company to build it, added another. As the crowd thinned, Thomas approached me again, this time with a serious expression. "I'm an accountant," he said quietly, "and I've always wondered about the HOA finances. They haven't published detailed statements in years, just summaries. If they've been charging for path maintenance on private property, then where did that money actually go?" I finished his thought. "Exactly." Mark overheard this and pulled me aside. "We should file for discovery of all HOA financial records," he suggested. "If there's financial impropriety on top of everything else, this could be much bigger than a dispute over a gate." Officer Reynolds joined our huddle. "I've taken statements from several witnesses who saw board members tampering with your property. We have enough to proceed with charges if you want to press them." I looked around the room. Jessica and the other board members had disappeared, but most of my neighbors remained, talking in small clusters, occasionally glancing my way. This wasn't just about my gate anymore. This was about a community that had been manipulated and deceived for far too long. "I want to press charges," I decided, "and I want to see those financial records." As we left the community center, Sarah hurried up to walk beside me. "You were wonderful," she said, patting my arm. "So brave." "Thank you for warning me," I replied. "I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled mischievously. "Oh, I'm not done yet. I've been keeping notes on every board meeting for the past 5 years, every inconsistency, every strange decision. I never thought I'd have a chance to use them." I looked at her with newfound respect. "Sarah, would you be willing to share those notes with my lawyer?" Her eyes twinkled. "I thought you'd never ask." As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't expected, a sense of purpose. This fight wasn't just for me anymore. It was for Sarah, for Thomas, for every neighbor who'd been bullied and misled. The battle for my gate had uncovered something much darker, lurking beneath the surface of our pleasant community, and now, with allies at my side, I was determined to bring it all to light. What would tomorrow bring? I sat quietly in the back of the courtroom, watching Jessica fidget nervously as my lawyer, Mark, spread documents across the table with a flourish. What had started as a seemingly simple gate dispute was about to blow the lid off something far bigger, something that reached into the darkest corners of our community. "Your Honor," Mark began, his voice resonating with authority, "during discovery, we uncovered deeply disturbing financial irregularities that directly connect to this case." Jessica's lawyer jumped up, objecting. "Objection! This is about a property line dispute, not finances." The judge peered over his glasses, his expression stern. "I'll allow it. These documents were properly submitted during discovery." My heart pounded in my chest as Mark clicked to the first slide. It showed a glossy HOA brochure featuring a photograph of my lakefront path, prominently labeled Community Lake Access. I'd never seen this brochure before. For 7 years, Mark explained, his voice dripping with controlled outrage. The HOA has been advertising my client's private property as a community amenity. They've increased dues 3 times, citing maintenance costs for this path. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of neighbors who'd come to observe the proceedings. Sarah, my elderly neighbor, gasped audibly. Furthermore, Mark continued, building the case with methodical precision, we've uncovered payments totaling $127,000 to a company called Lakeside Maintenance LLC. This company has no employees, no website, and no business license. Its bank account, however, shows regular transfers to Jessica's personal account. Jessica's face turned ghostly white. Her lawyer whispered frantically in her ear, his face a mask of panic. Robert, the HOA treasurer, slumped in his seat, defeated. Outside, during the recess, neighbors surrounded me, their faces a mixture of anger and disbelief. They raised our dues $200 last year for that path, Thomas exclaimed, his face red with fury. I had to pick up an extra shift each month to afford it. Sarah touched my arm, her eyes brimming with tears. When my husband passed away, I fell behind on dues. Jessica threatened to foreclose on my house over $340. Now I understand why they needed the money so desperately. Detective Wilson approached, holding a thick folder. We've been investigating the HOA board for 3 months, based on tax irregularities. Your case just gave us the final pieces we needed. When court resumed, Jessica's lawyer requested a private meeting with the judge. 20 agonizing minutes later, the judge returned, his expression grave. Based on new information, the district attorney is filing criminal charges against Jessica, Robert, and another member of the board, Diane, for embezzlement, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Court officers will take them into custody. As Jessica was led away in handcuffs, her eyes locked with mine. This isn't over, she hissed, her voice venomous. That evening, news vans lined our normally quiet street. My phone rang incessantly. The story had caught fire, spreading like wildfire across the region. A small gate dispute had unearthed years of deep-seated corruption. A court-appointed administrator called an emergency HOA meeting the following week. The community center was packed. People stood along the walls, their faces reflecting a mixture of anger and disbelief. The administrator laid out the full scope of the fraud. Beyond the path issue, the board had created 6 fake vendor companies that billed for work never performed. They'd skimmed from the reserve fund. They'd even taken kickbacks from the actual landscaping company. What happens now? Someone shouted from the crowd. First, the administrator responded, we'll elect a new board. Second, we'll conduct a full, independent audit to determine if funds can be recovered. Third, we'll review all violation notices from the past 3 years, as many appear to be retaliatory or fraudulent. My neighbor, Thomas, stood up. I propose we nominate Sarah for the new board. She questioned their spending last year, and they nearly ruined her. Sarah blushed as people clapped and cheered. I'll do it. If someone helps me learn the financial parts, she said, her voice surprisingly strong. I'm an accountant, said a man I'd never met before. I'll help. As the meeting continued, I slipped outside for a breath of fresh air. Detective Wilson followed me. You should know, he said quietly. We found a journal in Jessica's home office. She had a list of problem homeowners, with detailed plans to force them out. Your name was at the very top, with notes about catching you on violations until you'd be forced to sell. I shivered, despite the warm evening air. Why me? I asked, bewildered. I hardly knew her before the gate issue. Your property is the largest on the lake, the detective explained. According to her notes, she has a friend who's a developer. They had plans. From inside, I heard cheering. Looking through the window, I saw Sarah standing at the podium, her thin shoulders straight with newfound confidence. The detective handed me a business card. The DA will be calling you tomorrow. This case goes deeper than anyone realized. People in high places were involved. Are you ready for that? I thought of Sarah nearly losing her home, of Thomas working extra shifts to make ends meet, of the countless neighbors who'd been bullied and cheated. Yes, I finally said, watching the sunset reflect off the lake that had started it all. Some gates need to stay closed, but the truth, that gate needed to swing wide open. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of depositions, interviews, and court appearances. I'd never planned to become the center of a case that made national news, but here I was, sitting in the district attorney's office, reviewing my testimony one final time. "You've been incredibly helpful, Ms. Rodriguez," the lead prosecutor said. "Your detailed records turned this from a simple fraud case into something much bigger." I nodded, thinking back to my grandfather's advice about keeping everything in writing. I never expected my habit of saving emails would expose corruption in the city council. She smiled grimly. The connection between Jessica, Councilman Walsh, and Walsh Development Company would have remained hidden if you hadn't pushed back on that gate. Outside, spring had arrived at Maple Springs community. Fresh flowers lined the pathways. New playground equipment gleamed in the common area. The community center sported a fresh coat of paint. As I walked home, neighbors waved and called out greetings. The same people who'd avoided eye contact a year ago now stopped to chat. Thomas jogged over from his yard. "Did you hear? The recovery company found another account. We're getting back almost 60% of the stolen funds." "That's amazing," I exclaimed. "What will the new board do with it?" Thomas grinned. "Sarah proposed a real community lake access on the north side. It'll be nicer than your path ever was." "No offense." "None taken," I laughed. At home, I found an official letter from the court. The restitution hearing had been scheduled. Jessica, Robert, and Diane had all taken plea deals, avoiding jail time but agreeing to significant community service and repayment plans. My doorbell rang. Sarah stood there, holding a folder and a basket overflowing with freshly baked muffins. "Board meeting prep," she explained, setting down the muffins. "I never properly thanked you." "You're the one who stepped up to lead," I countered. She shook her head. "For showing me that standing up for what's right matters. I was so scared of them for years, I just paid whatever they demanded. Now, I'm helping run things." We spread the documents across my kitchen table. The new board had established clear, fair processes. Violations now required photographic evidence and board review. Financial statements were posted monthly. Every vendor contract had been rebid. "How's your gate doing?" Sarah asked, with a twinkle in her eye. "Wonderful, quiet, boring, exactly as a gate should be," I replied. Later that afternoon, as Sarah left, I noticed a moving truck at Jessica's old house. Her family had relocated after the scandal broke. A young couple with 2 children were directing movers. The little girl spotted me and waved enthusiastically. Despite everything, I felt a surge of hope for these newcomers. That evening, I attended the monthly HOA meeting, something I'd avoided for years. The community center buzzed with conversation. As Sarah called the meeting to order, a sense of normalcy, of genuine community, filled the room. "First item," Sarah announced, "the Lake Access Project. Construction begins next month, and we're under budget, thanks to Thomas's negotiations with contractors." People applauded as Thomas proudly displayed the plans. The new access point would include a fishing dock, a picnic area, and a kayak launch, far better than my narrow path had ever been. After the meeting, I lingered, watching neighbors chat in groups. Detective Wilson appeared at my side. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "Councilman Walsh resigned today. The investigation into the development kickbacks is expanding to 3 other council members." "Will it never end?" I asked, amazed at how far the ripples had spread. He shrugged. "Corruption is like a weed. Pull one, find 10 more below the surface. But this neighborhood, you folks pulled the whole root system." As we walked toward the parking lot, he added, "By the way, the FBI's Public Corruption Unit has some questions about county zoning officials. Would you be willing to speak with them?" I hesitated, thinking of the months of stress, the threatening letters, the vandalism to my house during the height of it all. "Yes," I finally said. "Some fights are worth having." At home, I walked down to my lake path and unlocked my gate. The water glittered under the moonlight. A year ago, I'd fought for this strip of land out of principle. Now, I understood it had never really been about the gate at all. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah. "Board approved your garden expansion unanimously. Congrats." I smiled, remembering how I'd properly submitted the form, included the required diagrams, and presented at the meeting. The system working as it should. Fair, transparent, and reasonable. From across the lake came the sound of laughter, a neighborhood barbecue at the community park. Next year, they'd have their own lake access to enjoy. I locked my gate and headed back to the house, stopping to check my mailbox. Inside was a hand-addressed envelope. I opened it to find a thank you card, signed by dozens of neighbors. Some people close gates, it read. Others open doors for an entire community. Thank you for being the second kind. This story teaches us that even seemingly small acts of courage, like standing up for our rights, can have enormous, unforeseen consequences. It highlights the importance of questioning authority, demanding transparency, and the power of community action to expose and combat corruption. It also demonstrates that persistence, documentation, and seeking help from the right sources, like a lawyer and the police, are crucial when facing injustice. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever faced a similar situation with an HOA or other authority figure? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire and empower.